sets to automatically go and you can't control it. So yeah, I can understand that. I have my podcast on a couple websites that do that. They just kind of go automatically. I'm like, stop it. Just want to see my numbers. I don't care.
Yeah, right.
Watch myself again.
So I think that's probably what you came across. I'm gonna remove that actually because I've had problems with it myself, and it's annoying.
Yeah. You have another podcast, Kyle?
No.
You said your podcast.
Well, I was talking in general. It's Scott and I's podcast, but so I have a bunch of audio clips that I use throughout the podcast, and one of them is an intro and one of them is an outro, which I think is appropriate here. So, and maybe I don't know, feedback clip I might play too, but otherwise, we'll just do some general question and answer like you're used to. I watched several of those podcasts that you have listed on your website. So it'll be similar to that. I mean, I don't.
Yeah.
I may not ask you anything earth shattering, but we'll try to find something.
It's fine.
Scott sometimes comes up with some crazy stuff, so maybe we'll have something there for you. But I'll
be good.
I'm gonna stop sharing the screen.
You guys can ask me whatever you want.
You're the one that's in the United States. Your other friend is in
yeah, Jamie's in the UK. I'm over.
Okay,
I'm over by Seattle.
We got to bring it.
Yeah, he's
been swamped with work. It's weird. I've barely talked to him this week. He's just like, yeah, I'm so busy with work. I'm like, that's good. Work, man. Make that money.
Make the money. All right, I'm going to start the clip and then we'll just get started after that. I'll get us into it.
Welcome to the Rebel Alliance Briefing Room Podcast. We are here to podcast about anything and everything Star Wars with you. Please visit our website where you can play current and past episodes. That's https://RABR.KyleJohansson.us. That's RABR.KyleJohansson.us. On the left-hand side is a navigation menu. You can use this to learn how to load the Rebel Alliance Briefing Room podcast on your Android or Apple phone and tablet. And we have direct links to our podcast on Apple and Google Podcasts. Please participate by connecting to our social media, answering questions of the week, or submitting feedback directly from the site. Again, all of these are available at the Rebel Alliance Briefing Room website at RABR.KyleJohansson.us. And now, it's time to talk Star Wars. I am Kyle John Johansson, and this is Andrew Scott Sutton. Say hello.
There's Andrew. Kyle, we have a guest today. Go ahead and introduce yourself, Justin.
My name is Justin Berger, and I'm the co-author of the new book, Return of the Jedi, Unauthorized Timeline. I also wrote another book. It was the predecessor to this one, which was The Empire Strikes Back, Unauthorized Timeline. And I wrote that one by myself, and then Jamie and I teamed up to do the Return of the Jedi one. And it's out now at Amazon.
Right, and you've got your Jedi Timeline website here that I'm showing. And a couple interviews and everything you've got, and a list of the information that's generally in there. And that kind of kicks off my first question in a way. You mentioned your previous book, and in some of the interviews I heard you do already, you said that actually Return of the Jedi was your favorite movie. Is that true, or is it Empire Strikes Back?
Empire's my favorite movie.
Okay. Can you kind of explain why you think Empire's better than Return of the Jedi?
Yeah,
what led you to that?
There's a lot of reasons. I mean, Empire to me is just a more serious film. It's kind of a darker tone. There's more time spent on the characters. I feel like there's more character development. I feel like Jedi is like kind of the end. So it's like we've established the characters, we've established this world, the story. So Lucas was like, let's just do an action-packed, fast-paced movie. We don't have to spend a lot of time with these characters because we already know who they are and what's happening. He just wants, he's kind of racing to the end. And I like Jedi. It's a great film, but Empire is just, you really get to sit with the characters, and it feels more kind of adult, I guess. Even as a kid, I kind of just felt it was more of a mature Star Wars. And I love the first film, and I love Jedi, but Empire just hits that sweet spot of, like, space opera, fantasy, sci-fi, drama. It's just everything in that is great. Like Luke's training on Dagobah, and then you got the scenes on Bespin and the carbon freezing chamber. I mean, those are intense. Where it's one of my favorite scenes is where Han and Leia are saying goodbye, and then Han's like telling Chewie, like, you got to take care of her now. And then they push him back, and she looks over at Vader, and Vader just gives this look. And it's like, even though he's wearing the mask, you can kind of feel this intensity.
Yeah, I'm there right
and
now.
She kind of backs up because she's like, oh, crap. Like, she knows bad things are coming. So, I mean, it's pretty intense.
Yeah.
So it's my favorite Star Wars film. It's actually my favorite film of all time ever. Like, it's just, to me, the my favorite movie ever. And it's probably because I grew up with it as a kid and I saw it so many times, but just something about it is really profound to me, and I really love it.
Not to out your age or anything, but how old are you?
I was born in 1975, so I am. What does that make me? 47.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah. So
I'm not good.
You're 10 years younger than Scott, I think, right? Is that right, Scott?
8 years. 8 years. I'm 55.
8 years. Yeah. So, and I'm a few years younger or a year or so younger than him. So for me, so it was, I have a weird story about seeing what's now called A New Hope, the first one. And Empire was, I think the first time I saw it was on TV, so I didn't probably have a good experience. It was, packed with commercials and all that crap. And but The Return of the Jedi was my favorite because I actually saw that in the theater. We waited in line. My dad and I waited in line and stuff like that for it.
Yeah.
And I believe my mom was with us at the time. Somewhere around there, they got divorced, but I believe my mom was there too, and all that. And I think probably because I saw it in the theater, that's probably why I liked it the best.
Yeah.
Because the theater experience always is the best experience, for anything. But and Scott and I spent a lot of time in the theater watching.
I'm all in the theater. So, but
yeah, we Scott and I watched most of them together in the theater at some point. Probably the prequels, not so much. I can't remember. I think maybe we saw Revenge of the Sith in the theater. Maybe I don't remember, Scott.
Yeah, I think that's
But the other two we didn't see.
Didn't they just come out around Christmas all the time?
Yeah.
Yeah, we meet up
usually. Anyway, I find that interesting. I mean, Empire Strikes Back, it is probably you've already got the storyline set, and you're like, okay, here we go. Let's do some character building and stuff. And that seems like quite a bit of character building there. And then, like you said, Return of the Jedi, probably why I liked it at the time the most was because it was just an action-packed movie. Like you said, it was just pretty much start to finish. It was hardcore action. And I mean, you kind of knew what to expect because, like you said, it was the end of the series, and at the time, it was pretty much the end for all of us. We didn't know for sure if Lucas was going to do any more movies or not. But
but I think the biggest thing was just the whole Vader Luke thing about him being his father. It's like everybody wanted to know if that was true, if he was lying, or I think that was what everybody was waiting for. And also, is Han Solo going to get out of carbon freeze? Like, those two things, I think people were really anxious to see resolved before Jedi came out. And that was the first movie I saw first Star Wars movie I saw in the theater too. Like, I did not see Empire or Star Wars before Jedi because they came out on VHS 1984. So I didn't even see them until after I saw Jedi. Like, I knew of Star Wars. I had the storybooks and I knew the stories and all that stuff, but I hadn't actually seen the movies until after I saw Return of the Jedi, which is kind of weird, backwards, but that's how it worked out. And I grew up in a small town, so it's like I didn't have the luxury of going to, like, the the repeat screenings that they would do or the re-releases. Like we didn't get those. We got, the initial releases, and that was it. And I think I was too young to go see Star Wars and even Empire in the theater. I don't think my parents wanted to take a 5-year-old to see a movie in the theater.
Yeah. Yeah.
But at 8, I saw Jedi and I loved it, But I just I already had loved Empire before that, but once I saw the movie, it just added so much to it that it became my favorite.
Right.
See nowadays, like when I watched Empire, oh my God. When I got Disney Plus and I watched them all. And it come to Empire and I'm sitting there, well, hold on. Luke and Leia's in the same room with Vader. How doesn't he know?
Well, because at the time,
how doesn't he know?
He knows Luke is, but he doesn't say anything about Leia until later.
So he knows
because at the time,
and he doesn't say, or
it's all retconning. That all came after, so
you
kind of have to suspend your disbelief. That's what kind of pissed me off about the prequels, honestly, is because it kind of changed so much, like building C-3PO, and it's like, well, there's Vader, there's 3PO, and on Bespin, and it's like you're putting them in a position where it's like he would recognize who that was, and you would think C-3PO presumably had his mind wiped, but stuff like that, it's just kind of, it gets a little ridiculous. You're just like, come on, man, like you can't keep making us believe all this stuff, and that there's not repercussions that should be affecting these later movies, and obviously it doesn't, because at the time that didn't exist. So it's that's what really my biggest problem with the prequels was just like the weird things he threw in there to connect it to the original trilogy that didn't need to be done. And I was just like, when I saw the first time, he's like, yeah, Anakin built C-3PO. I'm like, okay, that's just dumb. Like, that doesn't even make sense. I don't know. When you look at the movies that come after, you're like, okay, well, C-3PO's there on the Tantive 4 when Vader, takes it over, and he's there in Bespin, and it's just like he would recognize C-3PO. He'd be like, hey, that's the droid I built. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
But it's just obviously no recognition because at the time it didn't exist. So it kind of creates plot holes, and it just kind of feels disjointed. So
yeah, and it's weird too to me. They've mentioned in the sequels that his mind has been wiped several times, but they didn't mention anywhere else. But
R2D2's hasn't. So that's R2D2 knows everything.
Apparently, right. Apparently, R2D2 has always had a backup of C-3PO, but. It's just strange, he also doesn't really recognize R2D2, and it's a weird coincidence that Luke ends up with both of them right before everything happens to his family and such. Just a weird coincidence that his father's toys show up on his doorstep.
Well,
so to speak.
It's not a weird coincidence. It's just called retconning, where he just Lucas decided, like, I'm just going to do this and you're going to accept it. And then the whole line where Obi-Wan is like, I don't seem to remember ever owning a droid and not recognizing who R2-D2 is. And people try to make up stories about why, he's just faking it. He knows who R2-D2 is. He just doesn't want to admit to Luke. And it's like, come on. Like, that is not the reason. It's because at that time, they were all strangers. Nobody knew each other. There was, and it just, the prequels make the galaxy a very small place. It's just like everybody knows everybody. It's like Cheers. Like, everybody knows your name. And I'm just like, damn, like, you didn't have to go that route. Like, you could have done, I feel like if he had left those things out of it and made it more, I don't even know, abstract or something, like, they would have been better films. But he tried to tie everything up with a bow so neatly, just to say, like, look, these are connected to the original trilogy, and here's why. It just, I don't know. I'm not going to harp on it, but that was one of my biggest gripes with the prequels, when people are always like, oh, why do you hate the prequels? Yeah. It's like, well, that's why. I mean, by themselves, I guess they're pretty good movies and they're fun, and I watched them, but it's just the problems like that really rubbed me the wrong way. And then I felt like the sequel trilogy had a bunch of problems too, and I just I don't want to get into that, but it's just like, once The Mandalorian came out, I was like, okay, now we're back on track, because this feels like Star Wars. This feels like that universe that I grew up with, and it's like I am coming at it from a very specific, like, I'm an I'm an old guy, so I grew up with the trilogy, so I have a very specific perspective on it. Whereas if you're a kid and you grew up with the prequels or the sequel trilogy, that's what you know, and that to you is great, and it's like I get why there's conflict in the Star Wars community, but at the same time it's just objectively when you look at it as a whole, it's just kind of there's a lot of plot holes and stuff that don't make sense because they didn't take the time with it. That's my 2 cents on it.
Okay, so
like watching. I have a problem trying to connect, even though it's just trying to follow, Andor. They try to connect there
Yeah.
about that character's life, but also try to follow some timeline and stuff like that, and I get messed up there too.
Well, I think the second season will probably bring it all together in a better way.
It will, and that's why on my website I have this I'm showing on my screen. I have this timeline because sometimes it gets confusing, where things are. And this is just a timeline that I've copied off of someplace else, and I've changed it and added some things to it, but it helps keep track because like Andor happens at the same time as Rogue One technically. Rogue One is Andor basically ends and Rogue One starts is the way I see it, and so maybe some of those events in Andor could be happening during Rogue One. We don't know for sure right now, but
no, they say that the end of Andor will lead directly into Rogue One.
Right.
So it's all before Rogue One.
And to be honest, outside of the original trilogy, Rogue One is one of my favorite of all of the Star Wars movies.
Yeah,
mostly because it's so different in a way that it's the first movie they've done where nobody survives. Everybody's dead. There's a few people that we know. I mean, there's a glimpse of Vader in there, I think. Those that he survives. But all of our main characters do not survive. And that's just, they don't do that in Star Wars,
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, that's why I like Andor too, because I mean, Andor continues that of like, people are going to die. And Andor really shows like the dark side of the rebellion, whereas like, these people had to get their hands dirty to defeat the Empire. Like it wasn't, it wasn't a clean thing. Like they had to fight dirty. And
you don't really Tony Gilroy is really good in that. I really like him as a director.
But you haven't really seen that in Star Wars because they always do the rebels as like, hey, they're the good guys, and they do everything right. And it's like, no, you don't take down an empire by playing by the rules,
Okay, so let's get back onto the book here. So I've got a picture here of Jamie up here. Kind of tell me how you guys met and what I guess started this book cooking for you guys.
Well, Jamie and I followed each other on Twitter, and so I knew of him, he knew of me, but we didn't personally know each other. I think we got into some arguments about Star Wars stuff a few times, but he had done the filmumentary stuff, which he had done these. I don't know if you've seen them, but they're on Vimeo. He did these videos where he took and he did a lot of them, but he did the first ones were like the original Star Wars, where he would take the film and then play the film and then had voiceover interviews with cast and crew and show behind the scenes footage, and so you would watch the film and go through it, and he would kind of tell the story of how it was made as you're watching it. And I'd seen those, and I thought those were great, and I actually had that idea before I even saw his, and then I saw his, and I was like, oh well, now I don't have to do that because he did it already. So that's how I kind of knew who Jamie was. And then he had his podcast that I'd listened to a few times, which was the Filmumentaries podcast, where he interviews a bunch of people from the industry, like people like, he's interviewed Dennis Muren and Ken Ralston and Mickey Herman and just a ton of these people who worked on these films. And it's just really great stories that he gets out of people. Right. So I knew him from those things. And he had known me from my Empire book. And he had started last year posting dates related to Jedi, because it was at like last year, a year ago, before the 40th anniversary, it was the time, it was 40 years of them making Jedi. So he was posting dates that correlated to that. And then he's like, wait a minute, didn't somebody do an Empire book like this or something? And so he had reached out to me and asked if I was going to do a Jedi book because he remembered I had done my Empire book. And I had actually decided I wasn't going to do any more books because it was a lot of work. And I was just, Empire being my favorite film, it was kind of a one and done thing. I was just like, I just want to do this for myself, put it on Amazon. If somebody wants to buy it, great. But, it was more for me. But when he approached me with that idea, I was kind of like, because I mean, I had thought about it, but I wasn't really serious about doing it because, like I said, it was a lot of work. And he was interested in helping me do it and put it together. And I thought, well, that could be cool because he and I kind of come from a similar background in terms of, we're lifelong Star Wars fans. He's really into the behind the scenes stuff like I am. And so I thought it would be a perfect marriage of us coming together to create that book. And so I responded to him and said, you know what, let's do it. And that was about a little over a year ago. And then we just started adding dates to like a Google Doc, and we just were pulling dates from books and newspaper clippings and just anywhere we could find them, documents, production documents, and just creating the book that way. And then I would say probably about 3 months before the book came out is when we really started putting it into a book and collating it and building the book itself. And then it just kind of went from there. And then we started finding more dates and everything and doing call sheets. We would recreate the call sheets that we'd find and throw those in the book. So, and then he got some dates from some people that he'd interviewed, the guys who worked on Jabba the Hutt, like John Coppinger and Dave Barclay. They gave him their personal production diaries from 1982. 81, 82, where they were working on Jabba and they were writing things down, like little simple things like, working today on Jabba's eyes and they're not working right. Or today we, kissed Princess Leia with Jabba's tongue, or, just stuff like that. And it's really kind of fun stuff. And that was exclusive. Like they had never, those things hadn't seen the light of day since they worked on it, but they were friends with Jamie and they were like, hey, do you think this would be good for your book? And Jamie got super excited. I got super excited. So like, this is awesome. Like nobody's ever seen these, and it's like, so they let us put it in the book as exclusive. So we were very fortunate to have that. And we threw those in. We got Jim Bloom, who was co-producer on Jedi. Jamie interviewed him and we talked to him and he was like, we asked him to do the intro for the book and he was willing to do it. And we were very excited about that. So I sent him the Empire book so he could have a feel of like what we were doing. And then I think we sent him like a PDF copy of the book before it was done, just so he could kind of have a general understanding of what he was writing about. And then he wrote us an introduction and it was great. It's like, I think it's like 5 pages long. And it just talks about like his history of what his involvement with Jedi and everything. It was just very cool. And, just stuff like that. And we took some snippets from Jamie's podcast of people who worked on Jedi and threw those in the book. So it kind of adds some context to things and just kind of changes it up. So it doesn't feel so static and, like, because the Empire book, when I originally wrote it, it was more like an encyclopedia type thing where I just wanted it to be very kind of bare bones, mostly because I didn't want to get sued by Disney or Lucasfilm. I was just like, keep this a reference book and I'm protected by fair use because, it's that information is being used in that way. You can use photos and you can use content. And so I did it like a reference book where I didn't want to have a bunch of bells and whistles and run the risk of, them coming after me and sending me a cease and desist or something. So when Jamie came on board, he kind of brought in some design ideas and he thought, well, what if we try this? What if we do it, because I had done the Empire book as a single column where the text ran all the way across the page. And this is like an 8x11 book, so it's pretty big. And he's like, why don't you put it in 2 columns? Because then it would be easier to read and, follow. And when I did that, it was a game changer because it completely changed the way the book looked. It felt more professional, I guess. It just looked better. It was easier to read and follow along. So that changed the style of that. And then we're actually going back and doing a revised version of the Empire book to make it match more closely the Jedi book. And so I'm working on that right now, and that looks great. Because when I did the Empire book, it was like I'd never written a book before. Like I had no idea what I was doing. I didn't know. I was like, how do you format a book? What fonts do you use? Like all that stuff. I'd never done it. So I was like Googling stuff and watching YouTube videos just to kind of get a feel, make sure that I did a good job with it. But I look at it now and I'm just like, it's very sloppy and it's really like, it's a good book, but it's just it could be so much better because I've learned so much since then. I mean, that was in like 2019 when I made that book. I can't believe that feels like a long time ago, but
Right.
I've learned so much that I just wanted to do a better version of it, and then we're gonna add some of the filmimetry stuff and have Jamie involved in that one too as well. So it's going
Great.
to be a much better book there, and we've actually found new dates to add to it and everything. So that's the long story of how I met Jamie, how he got involved in the book, and where we're at now.
So you're saying we're looking forward to a second edition of the Empire book?
Yep, yep.
Great,
A
great.
special edition, if you will, but
Yeah.
it's not gonna suck.
Not as much as you thought it did before, but I mean they're both good books, and I've skimmed them. I'll be honest with you, I haven't read them, just
Oh, it's a
because
lot of content. Yeah.
I haven't taken the time to purchase them basically or anything, or maybe it looks like there's paperback and hardcover, and at least in the UK. I don't know if there's audio formats or anything like that, but
No, we didn't do anything like that. We didn't do ebooks because we just were worried about people pirating stuff or
right,
getting but we also wanted to keep it kind of old school and just have a physical book people could buy and read and put on their bookshelves and stuff. But for the Jedi book, there is a soft cover and a hard cover in all markets, and then for the Empire book is basically a hardcover, but it's a black and white interior because at the time it was so expensive to print a color book that I
right,
just was like, I'm just gonna leave it in black and white. And I regret doing that. I actually did a collector's edition version of the book that was full color hardcover, but it cost so much. It was like $65. And I was like, nobody's going to pay for this. Like, this is absurd. Like, it was so much money. And I just decided I'm going to do this for myself as a collector's edition, limited time. It was, I think I ran it for like 6 months and then I pulled it and it's not available anymore. But that was really nice because it was full color and everything looked great. And then you look at the black and white by comparison, and it's really a little bland because it's in black and white. And we did the Jedi book in full color because I didn't want
right,
to repeat that. And I'm not trying to knock my book, but when I look at it, I'm just like, oh, this could be so much better. And that's why we're doing the revised version because I really want it to be
right.
the best it can be and the most current and update with like every date we can find to throw in there. So once that book comes out, the version that's on Amazon now is going to go bye-bye. Like that will no longer be available. So I guess you could call it a collector's edition, but not really.
Yeah,
You better get it
uh,
collected on yourself.
yeah,
Get
yeah,
it before it's gone. No,
yeah. He
it's
says
fine.
that I have a few books. I don't have a very many books in my collection. You can see
I'm
behind me.
talking about the
I have these
big
bobbleheads.
bobblehead.
Yeah.
Those are all Star Wars, but I don't know, maybe 24, 30 books that are Star Wars books.
Yeah.
Most of them are different versions of Thrawn stuff, but um, I
Yeah.
purchased some of the
I dig Heir to
I
the
don't know, the
Empire.
young adults books as well too. It looks like so.
Yeah, I was collecting Star Wars books for a while, and became overwhelming because there's so many books. I
Yeah,
was just like,
exactly,
I don't have room for all these books, so I just started kind of keeping the ones that I really wanted to keep and getting rid of the others.
exactly. Like I've got after Firefly went off of TV, they came up with these books that were authorized by the creator and
Joss
everything,
Whedon.
and Josh Wheaton, and so I've got all those technically because my mom collected them, and when she died,
Yeah.
I got them. But I've been continuing them because they keep coming out every 6 months or something. They come out with a new one, so I've been continuing those. So I have those, but there's not very many of those compared to the Star Wars books, like you said.
Oh yeah.
You know, I remember when I was growing up, my dad had the fan fiction ones where they were just paperbacks that had a story or two in them and stuff like that back then, and they've written so many more since then.
Oh
It's
yeah.
just crazy.
Yeah.
But
Even when
When
they
they did the
started
comic,
over, when Disney took over, like I mean, there was a ton of books before that even happened. Like when it was
yeah,
just the extended
exactly.
universe, it was ridiculous. When I went to collect them, I didn't even realize there was that many. I
Yeah,
looked at a checklist and I was like, well, this is what's been going on when I wasn't interested in Star Wars when I was younger. It's just a
yeah,
ton of books, and like I said, I tried to collect them all, and I was just like, I can't do this. Number one, I can't find them all, and number two, it's just I don't have the room for this because I collect other things too. I collect the action figures, I collect the the toys, memorabilia, all this stuff. So it's like there's only so much room you have for a collection. I'm not Steve Sansweet. I don't have a museum where I can just put all
Right.
this stuff out. It's like I'm just a guy in his house, and and my wife is like, well, you can put it in your office, but we're not gonna have Star Wars through our whole house and stuff.
Yeah.
And I don't blame her.
Oh, come on,
So
honey.
it's like she's not a Star Wars fan, so she's not keen on that. But there's a couple things like here and there and throughout the house, but most of it's in my office. As you can't see behind me, I got the book up, but it's either in my office or it's in storage, and it just gets to a point where you're just like, what good is it doing in storage? I can't enjoy it. So it's like you kind of have to slow down on collecting, which sucks, but it's just too much
My
stuff.
wife is
You
my
got
wife is
like
that
the
way too.
original, like any of the original action figures, not the small
Oh
package,
yeah.
but the big ones.
What do you mean the 12-inch?
Um, I don't know. I have this guy. That I in this building that I check off offices and stuff with. That he has these. I think they're original and big. I don't. I think they're. I don't know how tall they are, but they're like, as I remember, they're the biggest ones I've seen.
Are they like this big type thing?
Yeah,
Because
yeah,
I know Gentle Giant has been putting out the original action figures, but like supersized, and they're on
yeah.
these giant card backs in plastic.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that might be what you're talking about, because those are the original figures as far as they're designed just to look like the Kenner figures, but they're
Vader
huge.
too.
Yeah, but they're huge, and I have a
Yeah.
couple of those. I have like I think 4 or 5 of them, but I can't collect those. There's just number one, there's too many, and number two is like there's nowhere you can't put them anywhere. They're so
Yeah.
huge. You have to have a whole storage unit just to collect them all, and they're expensive too.
Yeah,
I
I
got
mean,
a
like
couple of
I said,
those.
you could see the bobbleheads I've got. I have uh, all of these are Star Wars. You can only see 2 shelves, but there's 4 shelves there,
Yeah.
and they go around the room almost. I'd say at least half the room has got shelves on it, and they're almost full now. And there's obviously more out there that I could get, and like you said,
Yeah,
they're not cheap. So
but
they're not.
aren't the bobbleheads made in like a series, and there's multiple ones of the
Well, it
same
depends.
character?
It depends. So, um, kind of like some of the books that he's probably used to collecting, Justin's used to collecting, is they'll make something that is exclusive to Comic Con in New York, or something that's exclusive to Comic Con in LA, or it's exclusive to Walgreens, which is weird. Or exclusive to Amazon or Walmart, where they only sell them at those locations. But yeah, they do. I mean, like, when Obi-Wan Kenobi came out, the bobbleheads just got released, I don't know, 2 months ago. And Obi-Wan's been out for almost a year now. So,
Yeah.
and they came out with, I don't know, like 6 different figures for Obi-Wan. And then of course there's the other ones that are, like Obi-Wan's on top of the blurg or whatever that is, and then that's a different animal. It's not a blurg, is it? It's a opio or something like that's what they call it. Anyway, he's on the thing, or there's 2 people in this same bobblehead, kind of a dual thing or whatever, like that. And like I have a Mandalorian one it's like I don't know, 8-10 inches tall, pretty big. I mean, the helmet's like this big on it. It's a pretty huge Mandalorian one, but yeah, they're expensive to collect. I can usually only get a couple of them when they come out with a new set. Like Scott was saying, I get a couple, and lately, because I don't know if you've seen in the news, they announced that Funko is overstocked. They have too many and that they can't sell all.
I'm
So
not
they've started to
surprised.
reduce prices in some of them.
Well, that's good.
But that's not that. But yeah. So back on the book. Tell me, you know, the recent one. Let's go with the recent Return of the Jedi book. What was the most interesting thing that you found during your research? You know,
I said this a couple times, but it to me it was there's the scene of Luke Skywalker building his lightsaber on
Mhm.
Tatooine, which is a cut scene. It was never put in the movie. And it's on YouTube now, but it's you basically see Luke Skywalker in a cave on Tatooine. He's building his green lightsaber, and R2 and 3PO are outside the cave, and it's right before they go see Jabba the Hutt. And then Darth Vader starts communicating with Luke telepathically or something, and then they used footage from Empire or whatever. It's kind of an odd scene, but I think it's just because it was not a completed shot. But the person playing Luke Skywalker is not Mark Hamill in that scene, and it was an assistant cameraman. His name is Randy Johnson, and he had a spitting likeness of Mark Hamill, apparently even down to the cleft in the chin, and he was a stand-in that they would use for different shots, and I discovered that that scene is actually him and not Mark Hamill. And they did an interview with Mark Hamill in the mid 2000s, and he was like, "Yeah, I don't remember filming that scene." And he was like, "Yeah, they use stand-ins for stuff all the time." So it's like that wasn't even Mark Hamill. And if you look at the scene, you'll see he's got the hood over, and then the shadow falls over his eyes, and you can only see his nose and his chin, and that's it. And that's because it's not Mark Hamill, but it looks like Mark Hamill enough to where they got away with it. And so I was surprised by that because you would think an important scene like Luke building his lightsaber would be Mark Hamill, and it wasn't. And I just thought that was kind of fascinating, and that was one of the things for me that kind of stood out because I'd never heard that before, and doing the research, you find stuff like that, and it's fascinating to me, because it really shows them putting the movie together, and it was a very last minute shot. They shot it at ILM, and it was all done on a stage with
Mhm.
green screen in the background for where the droids are, and that was all superimposed later. And then they actually there's images of George Lucas with a shovel outside of like a small cave, like in Death Valley or whatever, that I don't know, you might see online, and they were digging out the cave to put the camera inside to get the shot of the droids outside the cave. So it's like there's all these references to it of them filming it and everything, but it just never made it into the film.
Yeah.
And I think they showed it at a screening actually, and then Lucas was like, "No, I'm going to cut it out." Um, but that was interesting to me. One of the things Jamie always mentions, which I found fascinating, was Lucas getting sued by a guy who claims he made the Ewoks and that George Lucas stole the idea from him because he had sent a script in to Lucasfilm in like 78 or 79 or something. And then Lucasfilm, it's like it's Rinsler's making of Return of the Jedi book has a lot of the information where I got this from, but basically it was this guy sent in a script called Space Pets, and he had used the term Ewoks and described them as little furry creatures, and says, "I sent a script to you, and back in the day, and I want compensation for my idea." And you see Lucasfilm letters going back to the guy saying, "Yeah, we don't have a record of you sending in this script or anything like that." And then this guy keeps corresponding with George Lucas, well, not corresponding, but sending him letters. And then his story kind of changes, and he's like, "Mr. Lucas, it's like it would really be nice if we could do the Ewok bus and go see children's hospitals and make all this money." And well, it's just like it goes from like you stole my idea to like, hey, let's do this idea together and make some money. And it just you really start to see this guy's story fall apart where he's just trying to make money off George Lucas.
Right.
And
Right.
it went to court in the 90s. It actually went to court in Canada because the guy was Canadian, and they found in favor of George Lucas, and the guy had to pay Lucas's court costs, and it's crazy that that was going on in the 90s. You know what I mean? So much, so it was like a decade after Empire or Jedi.
Yeah. Long time.
So just weird little things like that are really fascinating, and but nothing groundbreaking. I mean, there's no like smoking gun stories of affairs or weird
I
things that
I just
happen.
learned
Like these movies have been picked over so much already.
I just learned that
What
they
was
use
that?
body doubles watching Mandalorian.
Yeah, no, I know. And that's why I love the behind the scenes stuff, because you learn so much about them, how they make these movies and these TV shows. But these movies have been picked over so much. Like, there's so much information out there already that, there's not a lot that was surprising. It's like I knew most of it already.
Right.
It was more of just compiling it all into one place, which is what the books do. I mean, all the information is already out there. I mean, we basically did research. You're looking at newspaper articles from the 80s. You're looking at, current books that are already out, like Rinsler's book. You're looking at magazines, Starlog magazines, Star Wars Insider magazines, just any place that has dates, or
Right.
advertisements. And you're just compiling all that information into one place. And that's pretty much how the books came about. And it just took a lot of research and a lot of time, but
Yeah. And I know technically Lucas had like parts of the script for all the three movies written, but it wasn't really until like he got the budget for it that he actually started writing most of the stories. But my question is do you find that your Return of the Jedi and then you've got Empire Strikes Back, does any of those timelines kind of merge at all? Any of the timelines overlap?
Yeah, a little bit in terms of, Lucas first mentions Revenge of the Jedi in the Empire Strikes Back making of book, where he's talking to Alan Arnold, who wrote the journal of the making of the Empire Strikes Back. And he's interviewing him, I think, in 1979 at his house. And he mentions that the next movie is going to be called Revenge of the Jedi. So that was like very early in 1979, before Empire even came out. They had plans to do Jedi. And then as Empire's, being theatrically released, he's already ramping up for Jedi. He's bringing both Macquarie and Joe Johnston and all these guys to start doing concept art and everything. And so as Empire's kind of like having its theatrical run, he's already focused on Jedi and working on getting all the pre-production done for that, so they can start shooting, in like 82 is when they started. And so there's a little bit of overlap there, which makes sense. I mean, those movies took for so long to make, especially back in that time period where, there was no cell phones, there was no internet. It was just all like really, really analog stuff. So it took them a long time to do things. And that was the biggest thing, is just the overlap of starting one movie while the other one's just hitting theaters. But he already had the name and everything ready to go. So he kind of knew where he was going, I think, at that point. Because I know one time, before Empire, him and Gary Kurtz would talk in interviews and mention like, oh, we're going to do like 12 Star Wars movies, and they're going to be like James Bond films, where they're each a different story and a different setting or different characters and everything. And then that changed from 12 to 9, where it was just going to be the original trilogy, a prequel trilogy, and a sequel trilogy, and that was their new plan. And then that eventually changed, where Lucas was like, I can't keep doing Star Wars. I'm going to be dead before they all come out. So I'm just going to finish with Jedi. And so they changed it from 12 to 9. And we thought, oh, yeah, it's all Star Wars. And it's just interesting how Lucas always has this idea for 12 movies since, before I even wrote Star Wars. And when you look at the facts, it's kind of like, no, you didn't. Like, you're just kind of, BSing your way about that. Cause I feel like he wants people to think like he had this grandiose plan and everything was planned out. I think he was just flying by the seat of his pants. I think he had a cool idea with Star Wars. And once that took off, he was like, oh, great, I can make more movies. And then he started, coming up with these other ideas. I think he might have had like inklings of, because there is like the Journal of the Wills and all that stuff that existed, but not to the degree. I mean, if you read that script, it's like all the characters had different names. I mean, there's like, I think Mace Windu's name is in there, and Utapau and stuff like that. So, I mean, he pulled from that, but it was never this grandiose plan of like, this is what I have in mind. It was just like, I have this cool story I wrote that's sci-fi. And then I'm going to make a low budget movie based on that world that I created, which is really based on Hidden Fortress from Akira Kurosawa. And then he was originally going to just do a Splinter of the Mind's Eye as the follow-up to Star Wars. Like, he wasn't even going to do Empire because he didn't think it was going to be successful. And so once he had gotten Alan Dean Foster to write Splinter of the Mind's Eye, and they, that was the plan, and they were actually going to have that be the next movie because they didn't. Han Solo wasn't in it. It was just Luke and Leia and Vader. They were going to use props from the first movie, and it was going to be, kind of low budget. But then once Star Wars blew up and they start making all this money, he's like, "Oh, well, screw that. I can make a proper sequel." And
I
then
can do whatever I want.
That's when Empire came into play. And and they always talk about, "Oh, I always knew Vader was Luke's father," and it's like, no, you didn't, because there's if you look at the script history and like the script when he's talking to Lee Brackett, he not once mentions and she's writing the script, but he never once mentions Vader and Luke, and he claims it's like, well, I was trying to keep it secret, and it's like, you didn't even come up with the idea until you started doing revisions of that script,
Right.
And I'm not trying to knock George Lucas. I just sometimes the revisionist history stuff gets a little old because it's just like, come on, man, just come clean, Like, yeah, you're a genius, but you didn't have all this planned out. You know what I mean? So that's one of the things I kind of discovered doing the Empire book was that information of just realizing where Lucas kind of wrote himself into a corner. Because I mean, in the early drafts of Empire, Anakin Skywalker was on Dagobah as a Force ghost with Obi-Wan. And then he got rid of him there because he's like, well, I don't need both of them there. I already have Obi-Wan. I don't need Anakin there. So he got rid of that character of Anakin. So Luke's father was already dead at that point, like he said, like Obi-Wan said in Star Wars. So then Lucas takes him off Dagobah and decides, you know what? Let's make Darth Vader Luke's father. And I feel like he really came up with that idea while he was rewriting Star Wars or Empire. And this wasn't a plan from the beginning. So that's kind of what I discovered with the Empire book. That was a little surprising to me because, you always hear Lucas say, oh, I had it planned from the beginning. And then you kind of realize, no, you didn't, and that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But I just,
wow,
the way he talks about, his revisionist history stuff really kind of, it irks people because it's like, dude, be honest, and that's the thing with these books too, is like finding the truth, because there's a lot of like false truths out there. There's a lot of things that are kind of twisted a little bit because Lucasfilm is trying to present like the best facade to people of like, hey, we know what we're doing. But at the time, it was like I said, I think he was flying by the seat of his pants and he came up with some cool ideas. Yeah. And he just, it just kind of came out naturally, which it usually does when you're making movies, things kind of happen on the fly. It's not all pre-planned out,
Yeah.
So it was
marketing.
It was always confusing to me why Luke could do that, why he needed everything. So anyways, that was a long story. Sorry, but I just was kind of what I learned on Empire as far as
the marketing department had their own ideas from what Lucas had, and I understand. And I've watched quite a few of the documentaries that they made back in the day too. You can find them on Disney Plus now. If you go to the different movies, there's a whole section of stuff that was cut out and documentaries and all that stuff. And like you said, originally when he was writing the stories, it wasn't Luke Skywalker. It was Anakin Starkiller or something like that was the main character's name.
Yep.
And everything changed because he had so much trouble getting somebody to fund it. So he rewrote it so many times to make it look like something somebody would purchase, and everything changed. And once he got the money and everything, he's like, let's just start over and rewrite again. And and like you said, and it's to me, all that's fascinating. But the more fascinating stuff that I found in some of the documentaries is the technology they had to invent to actually do stuff, because there was the stop motion that they did, the physical, smaller versions of the ships and everything they did, the creation of all those items, but there was no computer animation back then. No. So it all had to be done manually and such. And I found that stuff interesting, where eventually they started creating some of the technology, and the guy who created Photoshop was part of the ILM team, and he created Photoshop while working at ILM, and went off on his own and sold Photoshop and stuff later on, which is really fascinating. Those are fascinating things to me. But I'm a technology guy, so that's kind of how I kind of see all that stuff too. Um, yeah, and uh, let's see here. So we've been talking for about 50 minutes, a little more than an hour, maybe, with Scott and I. So I want to be respectful of your time. So if you are okay with a few more minutes, we can talk a little bit more. If you've got things to do, just let me know.
I'm good.
Just let me know.
Keep going.
So Scott, you got any questions that you? I know you've already asked some, but do you have any questions you want to direct?
Not really. I'm just amazed at all the information, that you could get from the behind the scenes people that really actually did made the props and were actually the meat of the movie making.
Yeah, there's a lot of documentation out there. I'm sure Justin knows that. There's a lot of like he said, there's people that made journals of everything, that not everything, but today we filmed the scene where Luke Skywalker shoots the bomb into the little gopher hole. We filmed that scene, and this is what happened. And the electronics on there blew up 15 times today, whatever, stuff like that. And then there's the other stuff, like throughout part of the filming, Lucas knew that there was going to be a making of at some point, so they actually did film some stuff. Like, okay, this is what we're doing, and here's the guy in the shop that's doing the design of the creature or whatever, the Jabba guy or whatever, and some of that stuff they went back and did too. But they did have actual people going through and filming part of what was going on during the process, so they could document some of that stuff too. And stuff's always fun.
I think Lucas was just using that as promotional material for the movies. So I think
he was.
And then also you've got things like the storybook where you have to have stills from the film that are high quality. So it's like, I think in his mind he's like, okay, we gotta capture all this and take photos and take behind the scenes so we can create product so I can sell, because that was he thought the movie was going to be okay, like it would do well with sci-fi fans, but that was about it. He didn't anticipate everybody to love it. He anticipated making his money off like t-shirts and merchandise. Like that's why he got the rights from 20th Century Fox for the merchandising, which had never been done before. But nobody had really, other than Jaws, because Jaws was huge when it came out. It was big on merchant. I mean, Jaws was on everything. They just slapped a shark and the Jaws logo on anything and everything that they could. And I think that was the first time merchandising became a big deal. But by and large, it wasn't really a big part of everything. So Lucas was like, look, give me the merchandising rights. And they were fine with it because they weren't really concerned with it. And then all of a sudden he's making more money off action figures and t-shirts than he's making off the movie, which is, it just shows Lucas he is a genius. He really knew what he was doing from a business sense.
But I think it's funny you mentioned Jaws, because I went from a Scooby-Doo lunchbox to a Jaws lunchbox.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Seriously. Yeah, when Jaws came out, it was huge. It was a big deal. And then him and Spielberg became like, the biggest movie makers in the world through the 80s. It was just like when you saw a George Lucas or Steven Spielberg movie coming out, or something like Raiders, where it's both of them, you're just like, you had to see it. Okay, I'm glad they filmed that stuff and took those pictures, because it's history. It's film history. It's great.
Exactly. All right. Let's kind of wrap this up. I'm gonna. So, how can people contact you if they want to, or anything like that? Social media, email. What do you?
Yeah, if you just go if you go to JediTimeline.com, all of our socials, Jamie and I, we have our socials there at the bottom of the page. You can just contact us through there, and then on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, the usual. And that's the best way to get a hold of us. If you want to buy a copy of the book, you can. There's a buy now link at the top of the page on that website. It takes you to Jamie's website where he's got a listing of all of the book and pretty much every territory, country that it's in. So if you're in Australia, you click on that link, it'll take you to the Australia Amazon page, so you're not paying an arm and a leg for shipping costs. But everything's right there. If you go to JediTimeline.com, then you can find us from there everywhere. Like Jamie's Filmumentary's website, where he has his podcast and he has all of his videos and whatnot. So that's the best way to get in touch with us or find out what we're doing.
Yeah, and I'll just mention the hardcover on U.S. Amazon is $54.39. Paperback is $34.94.
And that's set by Amazon. I mean, we're hardly making any money on these books. Like the printing price is so high on these books, it's ridiculous, especially being full color. And we tried to get the price as low as we could. I mean, obviously we want to make something off it because we put a lot of work into it, but we're hardly making anything. It's most of that's going to Amazon, honestly. But it's just, it is what it is. I mean, it's a hardcover full color book, so you're going to pay, $50-$60 for it. But I mean, it's 250 plus pages, so it's, I guess it's kind of worth it. I've seen other books that are full color hardcover, sell for over $100, depending on what it is. So, it's not totally unreasonable. But then we have the soft cover because we thought, well, let's make a more affordable version. So it's like $35. And Amazon actually had the book on sale for a long time when we first released it. You could get the paperback for like $20 plus shipping, and then free if you had Amazon Prime. But it recently went back up to the regular price because they ended that promotion, and that's all through them. We don't set that price. Like any promotions is all Amazon. So
and technically right now it's
either or. I really like the hardcover.
I prefer hardcovers too myself. I think they last longer, and when you read them, they don't get all out of shape as much. But
they're more expensive, but they do last longer, and we don't make any more money off the hardcover than we do the soft cover. It's pretty much the same. So you can buy what you want, but my personal preference is hardcover.
Yeah, and full disclosure, the paperback price they do have it on sale for $2 off, and the hardcover is
that's something
$8 off. So, so they do. It's probably because they're coming up on Amazon Prime Day, which is like Tuesday, so they reduce a lot of things around that time. So maybe that's why it's reduced. I don't. It doesn't matter. I think you should go out and get the book anyway. Hardcover if you.
I was going to buy the hardback.
Yeah, if you prefer the a quality book that's going to last a while, get the hardcover. But I'm going to play a little thing here that's going to do feedback for us. But I want to tell everybody that's listening, if you have any other questions for Jamie and Justin, just send them through this email and we'll get them to them or ask them, and maybe sometime later might have them back on and do a feedback episode if they're interested. So I'm going to play this little clip real quick.
Feedback at KyleJohansson.us. That's feedback, KyleJohansson.us.
All right. Anything else you can think of, Scott? Think we're done?
No. I think we're done.
Okay. Anything else you wanted to say, Justin? You got everything out of your
out of my system? Ranting and raving about Star Wars.
No, it's always good.
The only thing I would say is just buy the book. If you like Star Wars, if you like movies, I think you'll like the book. It's mostly like behind the scenes content. There's pictures in it, like a lot of behind the scenes photos. There's a lot of information. I mean, it basically goes from 1976 all the way up to 2023. So you're not just dealing with just when the movie was made. It goes beyond that, and it talks about the special editions being released, and then the 40th anniversary. It talks about promotional stuff, like when the soundtrack was released, when the Burger King did their did their BK glasses promotion,
Yeah.
stuff like that. So it's like it really touches on a lot of different things, but it all relates to Return of the Jedi, and it's the same way with Empire too. I mean, it's the full span of that movie's existence, up till now. So it's a lot of information. It might take you a while to get through it, but it's one of those things you could just kind of pick up randomly and just kind of flip through, find a date, and like, oh, what happened on my birthday, and see if there's anything that happened on your birthday or anything like that.
Exactly.
So I don't know. It's just a reference book.
Yeah.
It's just fun to have. It's a good resource, and we've had certain people who do podcasts who say like it helped them already, like find dates that helped them with their research. So it's great. We're
Yep.
really happy. I mean, it's got 21 5-star reviews right now on Amazon. And
22 now it says.
we got another one. But it's like they're all 5-star. Everybody loves the book, and we're so happy about that. Like I mean, we're just geeky Star Wars fans that wrote a book. We're not like anything special in terms of that. Like, we just did our due diligence. We did the research. We put the book together. We're fans and made something that we wanted to see. And we're just so glad that other Star Wars fans like it and, are buying it, putting it on their shelves. So
Yeah, many
it
times.
just makes us happy.
Yeah, many times, fan written stuff like that is much better than what's produced in Hollywood and at least Lucasfilms and stuff sometimes.
Yeah,
because it can be canned. They can. We
there's
have
a lot.
an agenda and all
Yeah,
that stuff.
exactly. But there's a lot of love that goes into it because we love these movies, and
Exactly.
Exactly.
we want it to be the best it can be, and we're not holding back. We don't have somebody over our shoulder going like, maybe you shouldn't put that in the book, or maybe. And
Yeah.
our biggest thing was just sticking to the truth and finding facts. It's like if we found a date and we couldn't corroborate it, or if it was conflicting with something else and we couldn't determine what was the truth, we left it out because we wanted everything in it to be references in the something that relates to that date of where we got that information. So that was really important to us too.
Yeah, that's what makes it awesome. And like I said, we recommend the book. It's quite a reference guide, and I don't own it yet, but I probably will. Because like you said, Scott and I kind of play around a lot with our podcasts, but we do basically review everything that's video format of Star Wars. We don't really do video games because neither one of us really play video game.
Yeah.
We don't really do book. I do have, like I said, quite a few books, but we don't really do book either. So we just do the video stuff. And here, probably in the next break that they have, which is probably going to be next summer, I want to redo our podcasts of the original series. The New Hope and Empire and all those. And
Work
this
back.
probably come in handy. Come in handy to do it. So
when the final thought for everyone? When do you think George Lucas knew this was a thing? After the first movie, second movie?
First one. I think when he saw there's a story about him editing Star Wars for like foreign markets in Hollywood, and he went out to get hamburgers for everybody, and he saw a line of people outside the Grumman Chinese theater, and he was like, what's going on? Like, what's this for? And then he realized it was for Star Wars, and he was like, holy crap, like this is for my movie. And then at that point he kind of realized that like, wow, this is a big deal. And then it just kind of blew up from there. So I think early on he kind of knew, because Star Wars took off. Like it started out, they only put
almost
it in
immediately,
32 theaters. Like it was really, they didn't, the 20th Century Fox didn't think it was going to do well. Like they made people who were going to show the movie The Other Side of Midnight, which they thought was going to be their big hit that year. in order to get that movie, you had to take Star Wars and play that too. And that was like, they felt that was the only way theaters were going to play Star Wars. And then all of a sudden it flipped. And I think months later, they were like, well, if you want Star Wars, you got to take The Other Side of Midnight.
Right.
So it was just kind of funny how that all worked out. But yeah, I think pretty early on, within like a month or two, I think after the release, it was huge. And I think Lucas knew at that point, like, wow, this is going to be something special, you know.
Yeah.
But you know, the Empire, they still were doubting that it was going to be as big as it was. Like they're, you know, because sequels were not a big deal at the time. Sequels usually sucked, and so they were a little worried that the sequel would not do as good as Star Wars. And then it did better than Star Wars, and they were like, okay, well, this is, we got something. So I think it was definitely Star Wars, but I think after Empire succeeded is when he really knew, like, okay, I'm gonna make Return of the Jedi, and it's a bona fide hit. Like, there's no way it can't be a hit, you know.
Yeah, I agree. And I think, you know, kind of to your point earlier, I think they actually got better. Each movie got better as it went along. You know, New Hope was great, and you know, we got a good basis. Then Empire came out and was like, oh my gosh, it's even better than the first one. And then Return of the Jedi, like I said, in my opinion, Return of the Jedi was better. So in my mind, it's like, oh my gosh, it's this one's better too. And I how can you do that? Because that's never been done before.
Right.
You know, three movies, and they're all better than each other one. That's you can't even see that nowadays with other movies. You know, I mean, let's look at Terminator. Terminator was, the first one was pretty good, but the other ones not so much. I mean, maybe the third one got better, but the second one was pretty, I don't know. You know, they weren't that great. But
I mean, it was lightning in a bottle. You know, it just, everything came together perfectly for those movies, and you know, they're a cultural phenomenon now.
It was unique enough that it just kind of exploded,
and it created a whole new facet of fans against Star Trek. And you have the, you know, Trekkies, and then you have the people that are the Star Wars people, you know.
Star Trek was the big thing for sci-fi and fantasy people.
Yeah.
That was huge because of the TV show. But then, all of a sudden, Star Wars rivaled that, and all of a sudden, everybody was like, "Oh, Star Wars is everything."
Yeah. and you know, not to carry this on more, but when I was growing up, it was Star Trek, of course. My dad watched Star Trek on TV. And I think at that time it was in reruns. It wasn't the original. And that's, they didn't even think it was going to make any money in reruns, but it was like when I was 5 or 6, and I think it was in reruns then. I can't remember for sure. Anyway, it took a long time for me when Star Wars came out to replace the feelings I had for Star Trek, because it was special to me, because my dad and I watched it together, of course.
Yeah.
And it took, like I said, until Empire for me to like, oh my gosh, this is so much better than Star Trek. And that's controversial to say, because you know, the Trekkies think it's this thing and the Star Wars people think it's this thing. I grew up with both, and I like them both. You know, I've seen all the Star Trek movies. I've seen, of course, all the Star Wars movies. And I think it was with the sequels where the resurgence of Star Wars and stuff started coming back, with the fans and everything, and all the writings and everything started building back up again. That's when I kind of went over the edge, and it's to me it's pretty much all Star Wars now for me, for what I consume. I'm not going to tell you that if Star Trek's on, I'm not going to watch it. I will. But you know, all the new content that I'm seeing that's good anymore is around Star Wars. So
yeah, I mean, I've only watched a handful of the new Star Trek stuff, and some of it I like, and some of it I don't. But I think I think the problem between Star Trek and Star Wars was Star Wars continued with the same characters, the same universe. Everything was like consistent. Star Trek was like, okay, we're gonna reboot it. We're gonna, Captain Kirk is gonna be a new actor. And like when they did that, it kind of diluted it because all of a sudden you've got all this building that they did previously is kind of like pointless. It was like, okay, well, we're just gonna reboot everything and it's just gonna be brand new everything. And so all of a sudden, it's like they keep changing stuff. There's no consistency. I mean, there's consistency in the character names and the universe building and all that, but it's like you want to see William Shatner as Captain Kirk. That's your Captain Kirk. You don't want to see a new guy be Captain Kirk. And I understand you can't, obviously William Shatner can't be Captain Kirk anymore because he's too old, but I don't know. It's just the rebooting thing I think really hurt Star Trek more, whereas Star Wars kept those original characters and said, yes, Han Solo is an old man, but we're still going to put him in the movie. Luke Skywalker's an old man. I'm not happy with what they did with those characters, but still, they kept it consistent. And I think that's what Star Wars, why it kind of has more staying power, because it's a consistency. Like you can go to the beginning and see the same actors through the whole thing and the same characters and the same ships and the same planets and everything's the same because it's one universe.
That's right.
Than like all these different actors playing the same role. It gets a little confusing for people, I think.
And they kind of built the each set of three, they're kind of generally the same plot line. One of them's about Anakin, and then we're about Luke, and now we're about Rey. But it's generally the same plot line. It's a little different. There's differences, and we can debate that forever. But you're right, and it's I like that, but I'm also excited now, with the Mandalorian, which is exploring a different spot where sure we have Luke Skywalker that pops in there, and he's in the second season for quite a few times. But I was interested originally when we started this podcast was because of Boba Fett. I thought Boba Fett was going to be a huge, and it basically it didn't disappoint me, but it disappointed me that it was kind of merged into Mandalorian. So that all the stuff right now I consider Mandoverse stuff, except for Obi-Wan Kenobi. Obi-Wan Kenobi was not really Mandoverse stuff, but everything else is Mandoverse, and I like that. I do like that, and it's interesting to see all the different stuff, like you said, and then of course we've got Andor that's quite a bit different than all of them together, and many people say that Andor is the best stuff they've done since the movies, and I tend to agree. I really like the style and everything there.
It's dirty. It shows the fact how it had to be to get to where the originals were. It wasn't all friendly in this way and that way. It was the backside, the back alley. It's what had to be done. Like
right, and Scott's heard me forever on the podcast that one of the things I look forward most to, at least in the Mandoverse, which is Filoni and Farber, is the Thrawn stuff. I mentioned the Thrawn books that I had. I think Thrawn as a character, they've barely tapped him in the animated stuff. He is, to me, is almost I don't know, a stronger character than Darth Vader was, in my opinion. He's much smarter, of course, and he's more tactical in whatever than Vader was. Vader was smart in a lot of things, but he was more, violence and taking care of it and being.
It was
everybody feared him, kind of thing.
Vader was the Emperor's thug.
Right.
Where Thrawn is like a combo of the Emperor and Vader.
Right, and I don't think that Filoni's probably going to give Thrawn due justice, but I think he'll do some. I think the movie that's supposed to be coming out is going to be more Thrawn centric. in my opinion, because it's gonna continue from Ahsoka into more of the Thrawn stuff or whatever. But that's just my opinion, and I'm more fascinated to see that kind of stuff coming out now. I'm kind of done with like some people are kind of done with the Skywalker timeline. You've pretty much shown me everything that can be there. I'm kind of done with that timeline. I want to see some other stuff.
I agree.
I'm not too keen on seeing a movie with Rey in it again.
Not really.
It could be good, but I'm not too keen on it. So
there's enough Star Wars for everybody at this point. Like, if you like Rey, get a Rey movie, okay, that's fine. But I don't have to like it or watch it. But I feel like there's enough Star Wars, because if I don't like the Rey movie, well, then I know there's Skeleton Crew, or there's Andor, or there's something else that I can like. So I think that's really what is nice about Star Wars too, is there's something for everybody, in terms of you've got the animated stuff with Visions, for anime lovers. You've got Obi-Wan Kenobi series, which was not the greatest, but for people really into the prequels and stuff like that, I feel like it filled that hole for people. But then you've got Andor, which I feel like is very old school Star Wars, and Mandalorian, so it kind of fits, like everybody kind of gets a piece, you know what I mean? And you don't have to like everything. I think the problem is everybody thinks like, well, if you like Star Wars, you have to like everything, and it's like, no, you don't.
A lot of money at the Mando universe.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Some funny stuff.
What's making them a lot of money?
Yeah, exactly. It is. Yeah, and you mentioned the animated stuff. I think the animated stuff is some of the best stuff that's out there. Honestly, the Rebels series that was out there it was really good, and
I agree.
most people ignore the animated stuff because they think it's cartoon stuff. You're not supposed to watch cartoons when you're older. Yeah, right. And it is. It's designed probably for kids, and a lot of the themes and stuff in there are for kids. But it's more than that. I love those animated shows. The Clone Wars animated and those, because it gave you so much content and background of how things were in the movies and stuff. Because movies we assumed a lot of stuff. In the animated stuff, they explain a lot of it. Why they did this, and all the mythology around the Jedi, and the mythology around some of the Sith. They don't really talk about the Sith that much, but I really enjoyed those. And we have another person that usually comes on with us, Rick, and he has a hard time with the animated stuff. He just doesn't like it.
Yeah.
And I don't know, Scott might have a little bit of hard time with it too. But I like I said, I really enjoyed the animated stuff quite a bit. But
it grew on me.
So, huh?
It grew on me.
Like it grew on you. The Bad Batch is really good. Bad Batch is,
I like the Bad Batch.
Where we would argue about whether she was Force like from the beginning, or she led into it. God, now I can't remember the kid's name.
Yeah. We all know. Anyway, so let's wrap this up like I promised earlier. I appreciate your time. Thanks for giving your information on where to contact you. Both of these look really amazing reference tools for anybody, just for a collector, or for anybody who, like you said, doing a podcast or any research or whatever. Maybe they're going to write their own little Star Wars stories or whatever. These are great books to get.
On your coffee table.
Exactly.
Start conversations.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna repeat what we have for feedback, so people can ask us questions. So we have the email feedback at kylesjohansson.us. We have the link on our website that will take you to a form that you can fill out feedback on. We also are on YouTube. So this is going to be the video version. It's going to go on YouTube eventually. You can put comments in there. And right now we're on Twitter, and we just got ourselves an account on Blue Sky. On Twitter, we're at super_duper_pod, and I don't remember the address for Blue Sky right now because we just got it. But you can ask us questions on all those things, and like I said, thank you very much, Justin. Hopefully we can have you back sometime in the future if you're available. Maybe
I'm always ready to talk Star Wars.
Yeah, maybe you you get really bored and you decide you don't need to write another book. Who knows?
Well, we are going to do a Star Wars book.
Yeah, I know you. It's very grueling to do these books, so we really appreciate.
It is, but it's still fun. I have to say, it's a lot of work, but we still have fun with it because we love Star Wars.
Right, exactly. We all love Star Wars. All right, so I'm going to say goodbye here. I'm going to push the outro button. Maybe. There it goes. Hold on, that didn't work. Scott's telling me it's not working. Here we go.
Thank you for listening to the Rebel Alliance Briefing Room podcast. Please visit our website where you can play current and past episodes. That's https://RABR KyleJohansson.us. That's RABR.KyleJohansson.us. On the left-hand side is a navigation menu. You can use this to learn how to load the Rebel Alliance Briefing Room podcast on your Android or Apple phone and tablet. And we have direct links to our podcast on Apple and Google Podcasts. Please participate by connecting to our social media, answering questions of the week, or submitting feedback directly from the site. Again, all of these are available at the Rebel Alliance Briefing Room website at RABR.KyleJohansson.us. This podcast in no way is approved, sponsored, or owned by Lucasfilms Ltd., Disney, Disney Plus, or any of its subsidiaries. All opinions are solely owned by Kyle and or Scott, and in no way express the views or opinions of their past or present employers. Views and opinions are not supported or restricted by Lucasfilms Ltd., Disney, Disney Plus, or any of its subsidiaries. Any rebroadcast, reproduction, or other use of this podcast and its affiliate sites without consent of Super Duper Podcast Network and its host is prohibited. I am Kyle Johansson, and this is Andrew Scott Sutton. Say goodbye now.
And we've got Justin was our guest today, so say goodbye. And I don't know if you recognized at the end there when I was doing all the jabber stuff, the music that was in there. Did you recognize the right before it started doing the disclaimer? It's an obscure one, but in a Star Trek, they have the fight scene where Kirk and Spock fight because Spock's going through the Ponfar thing, and they're in that ring.
Yeah,
that's the music that they play during that fight. I put it in there.
Recognize it. Yeah.
I put it in there because there's always that fight between Star Trek and Star Wars people. I put it in there to see if people recognize that there and there.
It's a nice.
We try to have fun. So, well, thank you very much.
Nice.
You have a good day.
Thanks for having me.
Talking to us.
You too. Nice meeting you guys.
Nice to meet you too. Bye.
Take care.
You too.
See you, Scott.
See ya.
Okay. Hey, you're still there.
Yeah.
Are you tired? You got to work today?
It came